Now, Australia has certainly had its fair share of medical geeks over the years. Howard Florey, of course, pioneered the extraction of penicillin, saved tens of millions of lives, and picked himself up a Nobel Prize. In the last 15 years, not one but two Aussies have picked up Nobel Prizes. Peter Dowie in immunology and geneticist Elizabeth Blackburn for her work on telomeres, the bits on the end of chromosomes that may well hold the secret to ageing. Well, one of my favourite medical geeks was a man who back in the 60s and 70s was pioneering the cochlear implant. Graham Clark came up with an amazing piece of technology that gives the gift of hearing to those who are born deaf or those who lose that faculty. And our next speaker continues the dream of this medical pioneer. She could not do it without you guys. Here to illustrate the geeky attribute of invention and purpose is the Senior Product Manager at Cochlear, Jane Cockburn.
Wow, it's great to be here, and it's just fantastic to be around so much talent. As Adam mentioned, I do work for Cochlear, and I'm very privileged to work with a lot of people that have skills similar to your own. And it's these people that I want to talk about today, and also give you a bit of insight how they, and possibly you, have really changed the world for many people. So invention, what is it? It's creating something new, creating something different, and creating something better. It's all those ideas that you have every day. And purpose, it's the result or the meaning, what that invention actually delivers. So the key to my story is people like you that have ideas and follow them through and create purpose. So let's get started. Did you know that the cochlear implant is the only device in the world that restores a human sense? We have 5 human senses. If you lose one of them, it's not good. So this is hearing. The cochlear implant restores the sense of hearing, and it's the only device that can do it. So let's think about, what does that really mean? What's the purpose? Why have such a great invention? Of course, there's many things that it does. Some are economically based, saving a lot of money, enabling people to go to normal schools, productivity at work. But what it really means to people at Cochlear are things that affect us day to day. Imagine if you were a parent and your child couldn't learn to speak. Imagine if you were a parent and you couldn't hear that child cry at night, or you couldn't hear them say their first word. Imagine if your child couldn't grow up with their friends, their buddies, and play hide and seek in the street, and all those things that we all did when we were growing up, and we were part of a group. We may have been part of the geek group with Adam, or we may be part of the cool group. Imagine all the conversations that you've had today on the plane or on the train, getting here, meeting with people that you haven't seen for years. Imagine that not being able to happen, or it's just too difficult, so you take a step back and you don't do it. What about at work? How often do you communicate on the phone? Imagine if you couldn't do that. Or if you're an older person with grandchildren, you couldn't tell them that story before they go to bed. What about that special relationship? These are the things that are the true meaning of a cochlear implant. These are everyday things that affect the people that we love and share our lives with. But how did it start? So Adam mentioned Graham Clark. It's a tall lad in the back photo, on the left. And he grew up in Melbourne, and like any child, he had to help in the family business. And his father owned a pharmacy, so he often went and helped his dad. Then the problem was, unfortunately, his father was going deaf and going profoundly deaf. So something that he had to do was to translate those conversations. And so from a young age of 10, he vowed that he would solve this problem for people like his father. He saw what difficulty it created, and it drove his whole life. And in 1978, he implanted his first recipient, Mr. Rod Saunders, and that man could hear. 30 years on, Cochlear is still doing it. We're still inventing, we're still creating ideas, and people like you are still creating that sort of meaning in people's lives. So what about the products? I know that being geeks, you guys are all interested in the products. The first component that's used is the implant, and that's actually surgically inserted into the head. These fine wires are thread into the cochlea. The cochlea is where you have fine hairs that actually enable the electrical signal to create sound in your auditory nerve. This replaces those damaged hairs. So that's one component. The second component, if I can get out of my pocket, is the sound processor. And this is actually held over the ear. It is magnetically connected to the implant in your head and through radio frequency transfers a digital signal. So its purpose is to actually convert the environmental or acoustic sound to a digital signal, filter out all the stuff you don't want to hear, and transfer it to the implant where it is then converted to an electrical signal and a person can hear. It sounds pretty complicated, and there's a lot of software that goes into this baby that people like you build. But there's another component which is also very important, and that's the software itself. Every person has a different reason or slightly different condition for this cochlear implant. So every person needs a personalised program. This program, there's many parameters that are involved in the whole workflow of getting the environmental sound into your auditory nerve. So this programming software is critical. And it's not just used when you're switched on or you hear sound for the first time. It's used throughout the whole life. So if a child is implanted when they're 9 months old, for the next 80 years, they're going to need someone to look after them, someone to change their program, someone to make sure that they get the latest technology that perhaps people like you develop. They always want to make sure they get the best hearing. And of course, there'll be times when things don't go so well, and they will need, again, the programming software to help them. This is the sort of stuff that people that I work with work on every day and think about how they can improve it and make it easier. Of course, it's not just about what we do today. We're also looking into the future. Cochlear is a technology-based company, and we're always looking into the future and how we can improve it. We're looking at software that's easier to use, more intuitive, with more sophisticated automation behind the scenes. We're also looking at taking that programming function closer to home. How can we make sure that the recipient can just have a normal life? Looking at using the cloud, and I know that's a big focus of this conference, so bring it on, bring all that knowledge to Cochlear, because that's what we need to hear. These are the products that we work on, that people that I work with every day think about. They think about ideas, how to make it better, how to make it different from other people. We're still fortunate enough to still have one man within Cochlear who's godlike status that worked with Graham Clark. Jim Patrick helped to create that first hearing that first recipient received. So this is the type of invention and purpose that everyone is able to bring to the world. And as a result, everyone at Cochlear, we think about what it brings in terms of the world of sound that we open to people around us. These types of sounds.
So drop into the note, that's good. Turn the page.
So without people like yourself, software programming, that couldn't have happened. Those people would not be able to hear sound or to do what they do today. So I ask you today, keep thinking of those ideas. Embrace the purpose that it brings to the family and friends and society around you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. I should just, before I introduce our next speaker, make one brief observation. You did say that when you were at school you might have been in the geek group like Adam or in the cool group. I do want to point out, Jane, that I was clearly like one of the cooler guys in the geek group. I mean, if you had drawn a bell curve of the distribution of coolness within the group, I would have been at least 1.5 standard deviations above the mean. Hello, ladies.